Maria Sirois has spent more than 3 decades in the boardrooms of business, at the bedsides of the dying, and everywhere in between, doing one thing: offering the data, stories, tools, and perspectives that enable us to cultivate resilience, health, wisdom, and a greater capacity to lead ourselves and others well, no matter the strain or the suffering of the moment. So this is really important work that she's been doing, and she's shared it with us so generously in these books that we're going to discuss. She's the author of 2 books: A Short Course in Happiness After Loss and Other Dark, Difficult Times, which was her first Greenfire Press book, and Every Day Counts. And her 3rd book, The Generous Exchange, which is forthcoming in 2025, is a collection of essays reflecting on the benefits of appreciating beauty, goodness, and excellence. And those are themes that we're going to be coming back to a lot today. So I thought we might just start, Maria, with you talking to us about why it's so important to focus on goodness, beauty, and excellence as we try to work through our personal and collective grief over these times.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Jennifer. So much is overwhelming and so much is painful personally and universally. And it behooves us and it forces us to figure out ways in which to restore ourselves. And it turns out that when we attend to beauty, whether it's natural beauty or inner beauty, goodness, and or if we attend to excellence in the world, whether it's excellence in writing, excellence in design, excellence in kindness, for example, we feel restored. There's a sense of physical vitality that we often can tap back into. There's a sense of cognitive respite. We relax, we calm down. But paradoxically, we also tend to feel inspired in the presence of beauty or goodness or excellence. And the combination of restoration, inspiration, and that sense of vitality increasing is what enables us to wake up and live another day and bring forward the better parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm interested in the book how you blend.
I'll keep talking a little bit about the book for a second. And this is just a perfect example, right? There are moments of the smaller assaults and insults of life, and of course, the larger ones of violence and injustice and poverty and food insecurity. And in the presence of darkness, we know that throughout history, humanity has struggled to find a way to sort of right itself as individuals in order to right the larger systems. What's kind of gorgeous about any practices, and I'd be curious if y'all would put in the chat any practices you might have about attending to beauty, whether it's inner beauty or natural beauty, practices that have served you. When we do so, it also at the exact same time connects us to that which is larger than ourselves. We feel more, less alone in life, less exiled, less abandonment when we are paying attention to the natural kingdoms, when you actually hear the bird song, or when you notice the fox crossing the path, or when those of us who live in cityscapes, when that seed that you planted in your little plant pot on the windowsill, when that seed begins to grow, there is something about that sense that we are less alone and more important, not important from the ego perspective, but more important in terms of stewarding the systems of our lives forward, that creates that sense of mattering. So there's also kind of meaning in this attention, in this appreciation of beauty that is so, so important. Yeah, Rita, thank you. Walking in groves of trees, 1,000%, yes. I happen to live near the mountains, and those regular walks up into the hills, into the mountains, have been incredibly sustaining. Jennifer, I'm checking in to see if you're.
Yeah, I have quiet for the moment, but I'm afraid the smoke alarm is randomly going off. Sorry about that. And if I have to mute quickly, I will. But in the meantime, let's seize the moment. So you in this new book and in all of your books, you share a lot of personal stories. And I'm wondering if you can talk about the value of sharing stories from your life and sometimes very vulnerable ones. Why you have decided to do that as a writer and how that might contribute to writing the world, sharing your own stories.
Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with that sense of connectedness and the invitation to offer, one's history as an example of what's possible, and also to offer one's history as an example of not being the expert in something. When I enable myself to share those moments of grief or despair or confusion or just downright crazy town, then um, I'm choosing to honor and acknowledge that, there is a certain set of knowledge here and an incredible being of questions and seeking and longing, like all of us. And so it's partly my personal longing to feel connected to those who read what I've written, my longing to be not separate from the larger conversations that are so important. And also just now, if I may for a moment, move to the psychology world. Growth can only happen when we acknowledge that which has been broken or faulted or fractured, and acknowledge also the longing to sort of bring wholeness back together. And so there is no resilience. There is no increasing sustained vitality. There is no capacity to right the world in the ways that are organic to you or to any one of us until we acknowledge the broken parts. And so I do think there is an integrity in choosing to consider the possibility that one's history is informative and creates a community of conversation that can move any dialogue forward. In this case, the dialogue of restoring our planet and our species and our connection to each other.
Yeah, that is what I have seen as the value of purposeful memoir, purposeful in that sense of sharing your story in order to be a benefit to others. And, despite the super interconnection of social media, we're still quite alienated, many of us, right? We have the sense that we're alone in our experience. And so people will share very quickly on social media, but what you are doing in your book is more of a sustained inquiry. And I think it's really valuable. There's in both the first book and this book, I just want to slow down and really slow down with you and read one chapter at a time and just let that resonate. It's not the kind of book that you want to rush through at all. Each story you tell is so resonant. Like there's just so much in it. So I really appreciate it. And I think you wrote it fairly slowly too, right?
Oh, Lord, yes. I was in 2015, I was doing a seminar in California. And as a gift to the audience and to the speakers, the organizers gave us each a brass medallion, and we were invited to choose a word to put on the medallion, and it was strung on a necklace chain. And I just in that seminar had started, scribbling about the notion of beauty, and I had the word beauty stamped. But it wasn't until the pandemic that I actually mindfully began to think about what is this longing to write about beauty? And it was connected directly to my sense of overwhelming despair that happened by the time December 2020 had come around. And discovering that, while I wanted to hide under the covers in my bed, because there was so much grief, so much sorrow, so much loss, so much pressure, so much confusion, that getting out and walking into the mountains every day as a daily practice brought me back to life. And so I began to consider, oh, what if we don't look at beauty in the big abstract, but beauty as an element of our coexistence here that is always here available to us, just as inner beauty is always here available to us.
Yes. And this, beauty is one of those things that may sometimes seem like a luxury. Like, who has time for beauty? Or or it's self-indulgent, like you put your makeup on and it's vanity, right? So I think you're talking about a very different kind of beauty. You want to say more about that? Like what is the beauty that you're trying to point us towards?
So here I'm thinking about beauty as that which is precious, which may have an external appearance that is pleasing, right? Just as the lily or the peony might be aesthetically pleasing. Michelangelo's statue, aesthetically pleasing. But it's the essence of preciousness that actually makes beauty sustaining and nourishing and inspiring. There's a gorgeous paradox in looking at both moral beauty and external beauty, as well as excellence, which is they are fragile. They are impermanent. Consciously or unconsciously, we understand that that which we are paying attention to and appreciating will fade. It will, our influence. And Jim began talking about the great books. There are great works of literature that have lasted for centuries, right? Rare. That is rare. Most of us, the impact we have and that which we see will fade over time. And it is that exact sort of sweetness, poignancy, bittersweetness is the better word, that compels us often to attend to it. And then more importantly, and I think, and I was reading the chat in terms of the walks and the gazing and the looking up to the stars or looking out. More importantly, what we've uncovered and why the book began to feel urgent, not just pleasurable, but urgent, is that we have discovered in the field of positive psychology that when you increase your practice of gratitude toward any one of those pathways, external beauty, inner beauty, or excellence, it actually triggers pro-environmental behavior. We protect that which inspires us and that which we find beautiful. So if we want to continue to raise generations of human beings across the globe who are doing what they can to sustain some part of our existence, our coexistence with the natural kingdoms, then this is not a bad idea to uplevel this strength.
So I talk a lot about aligning the personal, political, and planetary. And by political, I mean the collective, the social. And most people will focus in on one of those areas. Like you'll have environmentalists who are all about the environment and the planet, but don't really think about the personal enough, you know? I think you really need to go from each person's heart straight out to the heart of the planet, if I can say it that way, you know, and create this alignment. And so, yeah, we won't be moved to save what we don't love. So a lot of this is about cultivating love. I think love for self, love for others, love for the planet. And it seems to me that your practice of appreciating excellence, beauty, and goodness is partly about remembering how to love ourselves as individuals and as a species. Like we are pretty hard on ourselves. Those of us who are aware of the destructive side, the dark side of humanity, can be really hard on ourselves. And there's a lot of guilt and shame and, sadness and grief. So I think part of what you're doing is providing another side. Like there's another story here that needs to be told. And that's what you're foregrounding.
Oh, thank you for that, Jennifer. I'm reminded of a conversation, Kelly McGonigal, who is a brilliant positive psychologist, health psychologist at Stanford, when asked about how do we possibly take on the environment, the world, climate change. And she said something, very direct, which is we need to do the small things like in this past year, I've stopped purchasing paper napkins. I just don't use paper napkins. I use cloth napkins and I make people reuse them over and over and over again until I wash them, right? So small step, right? But also, the medium steps like choosing consciously how often you travel with gas-powered vehicles, for example, to the larger steps like voting and protesting and writing letters, right? And that we need to be able to participate in the entire spectrum of activity to the best extent we can. Now, to go back to your heart, which I love what you said about the personal heart being connected to the larger hearts of the world and of each other. Our hearts beat 50 million times as fetuses before we even take a breath. Our hearts are profoundly capable of holding us steady in the presence of the challenge of great change. As an organ, they are remarkably resilient. What they require, however, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, is a willingness to be vulnerable as well as brave. A willingness to allow the tender pain of recognizing, oh my Lord, we are losing another species, with side by side with the tender hope of, oh my God, we have rejuvenated and reinvigorated a species yet again. Can we possibly hold both the brokenness and the whole at the same time? We are magnificent as human beings in our ability to navigate both brokenness and wholeness at the same time. My work in psychology over 30 years has been, to join the conversation of psychologists, sociologists, and anthropologists who have helped us understand humanity is remarkably capable of adaptation in healthful directions. And to go back to your first question, to reinvigorate that capability, it behooves us to actually create moments of presence in which we are present to that which nourishes us. I've come to think of beauty and goodness and excellence as nutritive. I don't even know if that's a word, nutritious, nourishing, that they literally feed every part of the being.
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit about one of my absolute favorite passages in your book is about the David in Italy. I would
Yeah.
just love you to share because there's so many different kinds of beauty, and that one seems to be especially poignant in this context.
So I was struck by an article I read in the New York Times numbers of years ago about the fragility of the David. The David's ankles have fractures in them, the statue itself. And so it is at risk. And the guardians of the statue and at the academia have done everything they can to protect from earthquakes, which is a major consideration, but also, vandalism and, to protect this beautiful piece of art. What is remarkable to understand is that that block of marble, began as an ugly, misshapen, huge block of marble that the villagers nicknamed the Giant because it sat in the middle of their village for years before the right sculptor was found to create the right piece of art from that block. To me, it speaks to this gorgeous integration of that which is misshapen or misunderstood or at the wrong place at the wrong time until suddenly it is seen anew by a new set of lenses. And I connect that in my own mind to the work, for example, of data scientists. What is her name? I have it written down. Hannah Ritchie. I didn't want to forget her, from Scotland, who teaches at Oxford, who's suggesting that this generation, this younger generation, is actually the first generation of sustainable participants in the world, not the last. They are the first because what is happening in the millennials and younger is a consciousness and awareness that actually moves them above the needle of where our generation and our grandparents' generation were in terms of sustainability. The David, as a physical manifestation of what is possible in terms of beauty, is just awe-inspiring. As an example of excellence, what we know is that in the presence of excellence, sometimes we feel jealous, like, I'll never be that good in the field that I've determined to be my field, whether it's sculpting or writing or marathon running, right? I'll never be a Michelangelo. But also often next side by side, again, with that jealousy, is a sense of wait, wait, wait. If I practice as hard and as long and put the effort in as Michelangelo did, perhaps I can come close to achieving the highest parts of myself in the areas that are impassioning for me. So many beautiful connections in that. And my Lord, I love what you all are sharing in the chat in terms of practices, in terms of attention, the poetry. It has become beauty again. With beauty above me, I walk. It has become beauty again. Imagine how we might feel. Oh, Jennifer, I had a thought this morning. Imagine how we might feel, you all, if we just spent a minute every single day during this holiday season, whatever the holiday connections you all have, just spend a minute attending to inner beauty and outer beauty or excellence, how it might change how we approach. Might it be possible that it would be enough to bring ourselves as we are to the Hanukkah table, the Christmas table, the Kwanzaa table, the New Year conversation? If we bring ourselves with our eyes softened to beauty, might we then actually see beauty in the drama or in what is missing as well as what is present?
Yeah. And so the thing, just to come back to Michelangelo a minute,
Mm,
the other thing about that example is you know how long it took him to create
yeah.
David. And when we think about, I think we're a culture now that values speed and instant results and solutions, you know, all of that. And I think another thing that your book is pointing us towards is perseverance and slowing down and recognizing that you might not have an instant result. It's not like popping a pill. Like psychology done well is not like popping a pill. It takes time, and that we can maybe appreciate the goodness, beauty, and excellence in taking that time. Like that's part of what is beautiful is that we slow down, and maybe in the holiday season, yeah, slowing down to appreciate just, you know, one candle flame and how beautiful that is. And that's enough.
Right. Right. Yes, it's the Thich Nhat Hanh presence, when you're washing a dish, could you possibly please wash the dish, and appreciate the fact that you have water and you have something that were able to enjoy food with, and you have time to clean something and perhaps return it to a slightly better state, right? And so here we are centering on this notion of presence that, you know, we cannot heal what we don't acknowledge, and we cannot move that acknowledgement forward until we are present long enough to what needs to be attended to as the next best step. And so this notion of presence in terms of healing our relationship to the world or to ourselves is absolutely vital. Appreciation is a present-based practice. It requires us to be sort of still enough in the moment to notice. I happen to be blessed enough in this moment. That's not a word I use publicly very often, but it is a word I feel in my bones almost daily. I feel blessed enough to be in the presence of some Colorado mountains today. And it's a gray sky, and the landscape is kind of brown. There's no radiant greens or yellows from the fall or gold here in this moment. And yet you can see how everywhere I look now, trees are stretching toward the sky. Annie Dillard said, beauty is present everywhere. Could we just pay attention? Could we just simply notice, right? So I do hope that if people choose to read this work or any work that inspires them along this line, that we take it slowly, that we absorb it, let it inform the marrow of our being, and see where it takes us.
So one of the things you do in the book is you provide all these inspiring role models. I mean, become a role model as an author yourself. You're doing this work, and then you're also giving us lots of places to look to for inspiration and sort of stimulation, right? So, are there some that you'd like to bring forward today? Some of your role models?
Well, I think, Robin Wall Kimmerer, botanist, activist, indigenous wisdom keeper, and storyteller, is just a remarkable example of how we don't have to have one thing on our business card. We can bring all of ourselves to the conversations that we're having. The woman who tends the strawberry patch and writes about the reciprocal exchange of generosity from the strawberry to us. And then as she returns the gift of the strawberry to her father for his birthday, that beautiful reciprocal appreciation and exchange, and then seeds the strawberry plants again, not being careful about how many to take and when to take them and so on. She's certainly inspiring. I mentioned Hannah Ritchie, young data scientist from Scotland, who has a gorgeous bit of work on what is also true, right? The data is terrifying and the data is also positive and invigorating. And can we hold both sets of data at the same time? Toni Morrison as a writer, the first time I read the first book that came to me from her work was Beloved, and I just about passed out from awe, and inhaled it, and then remembered, watching a conversation that she was having with a kind of an interviewer in the line of Bill Moyer. It wasn't Bill Moyer, who asked her how she could write about such big topics such as enslavement, and then choosing to her main character chose to murder her children because they had fled into freedom instead of having them be at risk from being enslaved again. And Toni Morrison said, the world is that big. Life is that big. Life is big enough to hold all of our stories. And that was, I think, the first permission I understood that as a writer or a storyteller or a poet or a prayer keeper, it isn't necessary to be Toni Morrison. It is necessary to share who we are and what we have.
And that, I think the title of your book comes from or is influenced by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Influenced by her conversations about the reciprocal exchange that we are invited always to have with the plant kingdoms and the bird kingdoms and the land itself and the waters and the skies.
Yeah, who really ask not much in exchange, right? I mean, they're so generous. So your book is a generous exchange. And maybe there's an invitation to human beings to become more generous ourselves, recognize the abundance and the generosity of nature.
And here's again where the data is fascinating. We've known for decades that if you put yourself in the presence of beauty, however you define beauty, it softens our hearts. And we tend to be kinder in the next moments to the next people we see. So if I've infused myself with appreciation for the sunrise or the trees or the stars at night, and the phone call comes in or the text comes in, or I'm at out at Stop and Shop or Starbucks, or I'm kinder to the next people I see. So it becomes this exchange of generosity that is quite fluid, quite organic. We don't have to force it. We simply have to choose to participate in it.
So you also write about how small acts of kindness are really important, and small acts of goodness, any little step that we make in that direction counts. Yeah.
One of the conversations the folk in my decade are having, I'm in my 60s, my mid 60s, and a lot of us think about legacy, like what have we created, what will be sustained after we're gone, if anything, right? I live in a small town. I grew up in a factory town. I'm not Robin Wall Kimmerer. I'm not Michelangelo. Let's just start there. So what might be my legacy? And one of the decisions I made when I turned 60 was to plant my flag in a value. And I decided to plant my flag in the value of kindness. If I could do nothing else, at least I could consciously choose to continue to be kind as best I can. Not every minute of every day. Lord knows my kids might be rolling their eyes right now, but kind as much as I can. And choosing a value, generosity, kindness, compassion, care, creativity, choosing, a life-giving, a life-affirming value and planting your flag there is one of the most gorgeous ways to create a sustaining legacy. And being brave enough to share that out loud so that it's not just a secret within your soul, but to actually say, well, I'm choosing not to enter that pickleball competition because it triggers too much of my competitive nature, and I'm not kind, and I don't like that about myself in that environment. To say out loud, I'm choosing to live into this value. I'm choosing to live into sustainability, or into the value of sharing words and the value of the imagination for writers, right? It not only centers and grounds us, it creates a sense of mattering, that our days matter, our lives matter, because I know who I am, or I know at least a part about who I am, but it also can inspire that in another human being.
And it's a very different approach than comparing ourselves, right? Because legacy, as you said, it has a lot to do with it often has a lot to do with, well, how do my assets compare to other people's assets?
Yeah.
Whether however you define the assets. And yeah, I think that's such a damaging part of capitalism and competitiveness that has seeped into our consciousness, and that we just need to get rid of. Yeah.
One of the great anxieties I carry as a psychologist are the high levels of depression and anxiety in our younger generations. And we know that some of that is connected directly to negative social comparison, right? Seeing someone else's lives on social media as if their lives are perfect and lovely and easeful and amazing and astonishing. And, oh my God, the fallacy of those conversations is disheartening. And there is something called upward social comparison, where we choose to hold in our mind's eye are the exemplars. I'd love for people in the chat, who are the exemplars in your lives? Who do you look to as evidences of excellence in the ways that are meaningful to you? Let's just remind ourselves of the incredible capacities that are out there. And Jen, I'd love to hear who your exemplars are in the writing world, because you devoted so much of your life to literature and writing. And when we do that, when we center ourselves on those who inspire us, Mia Hamm as a soccer player inspires me because she did not give up. Her capacity to persevere ties her directly to my Sicilian grandmother, who did not give up, right? I need those role models. And so who is it who inspires you? That creates that sense of upward comparison. Like, they did that. Maybe I can do this, right? I love this. My cleaning lady is an exemplar. Anne Lamont, 1,000%. Sue, yes, also. Jennifer, who are your exemplars? Who do you admire in the writing world?
Oh my goodness. Well, the 5 people that I'm talking to this week for sure. But I think a lot about the fleeting nature of fame. And a lot of writers, I mean, of course, all writers write to be heard and have something they feel that is valuable they want to share. But I really admire writers who write from their hearts because they can't not write, and they're not worried about likes and sales numbers, and
Right.
just really feel like they want to share what's in their hearts because it's valuable. And that is, for me, the definition of world rights and world writing is, it doesn't have anything to do with publication success in a conventional understanding. It's about seriously wanting to make the world better through your creative expression. And so that's what I admire so much about what you're doing.
Mhm.
You didn't have to take all this time to write a book. You're busy, got a lot going on, but to do that and to put it out there in book form, to share it that way is such an act of generosity and caring and compassion for others. So I really value that in you, just to bring it
Wow.
to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But so somebody who always bounces to mind for me as an example, who might even be on Jim's great books list, is Virginia Woolf.
Mm,
Is one of my all-time favorite writers. I did my BA thesis on her and read everything by her when I was like 18
mm,
years old, which was quite an
mm.
experience. And she suffered tremendously with mental health,
Yeah.
So there's also this sense that we do it anyway. We show up anyway, no matter what the challenges are, and put word after word. I think is it Margaret Atwood who said a word after a word is power.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I know you were writing this book during COVID, and it had to have been hard to actually get yourself to finish it, get over that finish line.
You know, uh, it was hard mostly because of the voices in our heads that tell us, oh, this is crap. I'm going to have an audience of two, and it's my children. It's because I force them to read it, kind of thing, right? So it's the self-doubt that makes it hard. It's also, the willingness to put oneself in um, reality. I mean, does the world need more printed books? Question mark. Trees, paper, right? To face the complexities of writing today. Certainly, I could have just published, something online that was available. Perhaps that's better, perhaps not. So there was some of that wondering, but also, when the word beauty came to me in 2015, it came like one of the, that still small voice. Like it was an idea that felt so resonant in my body at the time that I didn't want to ignore it. So I stamped it on the necklace. And to me, that's an invitation from the universe. When that happens, it's a call has been sent. And can I have the courage enough to listen and see how that wants to be made available into the world? It's Martha Graham the great dance choreographer, talked about a quickening. There's a quickening. And when the quickening happens, do we choose to ignore it, or do we choose to step up into it? And I chose to step up into it. And there were various moments where I had a ton of doubts. And for me, and I'll just speak very personally right now, if I don't listen to those still small voices, my soul hurts. So, some of it is protective as well, that I don't feel like I matter as much if I am just listening to other people's voices. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we really need to learn to value these intuitive voices. I definitely get them too. Like everything I think of substance that I have ever done has been because I just listened to the call. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's, one of the things that I am concerned about, as an educator who works with young people maybe spend so much time listening to external input that they're not as attuned to their own intuition. I don't know if you find that in your psychology practice. Mm.
I find it everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere. We've gone from, monotasking to multitasking to never being able to sit still long enough to actually hear a conversation or participate in it thoughtfully. Not everybody, but many of us. And so um, here's again where this notion of practices of appreciation can remind us of the beauty of the present moment long enough to sit still, long enough to feel what we feel and hear what we hear and think what we think, and long enough to consider that maybe I am enough right now. Maybe this moment is just enough. And so I don't have to buy the new iPhone, the larger TV, the new car. At least here in America, that's a compulsion that we seem to be fighting against culturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat to think We'll go to your questions very shortly. I just want to give some time because there's a whole beautiful last section of the book that's about practices. And I really
Yeah.
would like to talk about the different kinds of practices that you're offering people. Um,
Yeah. And I haven't, in the writing I've done in the past, I've never spent time articulating, specific daily or weekly pragmatic practices, but it occurred to me that people might wonder how can I do this? How can I participate more fully? Because gratitude is one of those things, appreciation is one of those things that can get banal. If we do the same three things I'm grateful for every night in our journal, after a while, many of us find that too sort of repetitive. And so challenge myself, and by the way, I'm seeing Sally Lee, challenge myself from an appreciative inquiry perspective to consider, well, what are the range of practices? And the possible. And so I have suggestions for daily, weekly, micro practices, school-based practices for educators and staff and school systems for children. And they hit all three of the pathways. But what came to me as I stepped back and looked at that section was there are practices of witnessing, essentially, sitting in the presence of and really witnessing and drinking in and allowing it to have those positive beneficial effects. There are practices of celebration of action, the journaling. I do appreciation practice by texting, 30-day practice texting, because it takes 10 seconds, but the reward is really fast. And I'm already on the phone anyway, and I can bring in a lot of different people. So there's witnessing, there's action practices, which include celebrating and sharing. And then there are becoming practices. What would it be like if you decided to become a little more of the inner beauty that you already are? Or if you decided to become a little more of the excellences that are already evident within you? What might that be like? How might it change the trajectory of your living?
so are you recommending people journal? Is that right? Turn to writing as a form?
Journaling, yes. Sharing stories, like let me share with you a moment of beauty I had, like making coffee dates, share stories, texting, collaging. In school systems, I suggested, what if you had an essay experience where children got to share stories of the exemplars who move and motivate them, and then share those without the school system. So many possibilities, so many possibilities.
Mhm.